afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rosen. I'm the chairman of the Rail Working Group, which is a not-for-profit organisation based in Switzerland, and it's a delight to be here with you. I've got two unenviable tasks now. Firstly, I need to lead you through something which takes a little bit of time, and secondly, I'm standing between you and lunch, and I'm very sorry about that, and I'll try and get things through as quickly as possible. But what we will do is upload afterwards an enhanced version of the presentation I'm going to give you now. And I'm going to go through the slides pretty fast, but don't worry, you'll get the slides afterwards and you'll get the detail afterwards. I think the impression I want to give you today is how the Luxembourg Rail Protocol, which you've heard a little bit about over the last day or so, how it actually makes a real difference to the way that the African and particularly Southern African economy will operate in the future. So let me just start by, hopefully I can move the slides. There we are. Somebody mentioned this just before. You know this already. The incidence of intra-African trade is too small. We have to find ways of increasing the way that trade goes on between countries in Africa. If you look at the comments that come out from this, you see that there's a broad consensus that we need to increase intra-African trade. And the railways are obviously the key to do that. And at the moment, it's costing far too much money to the economies by not doing so. If you just look at the statistics, the graphics are pretty clear. Yes, there's a slight uptick at the moment, but not much in terms of the way that intra-African trade is working, and particularly within the SADC area. And that's obviously a problem. The problem we also have is that the volume of track, of rail services in Africa is relatively small compared to other parts of the world. And whereas Southern Africa is, yes, better than Eastern Africa, it's still way below the average that we're seeing in other parts of the world. So Africa needs more railways. We all know that. And we know that the railways are the solution. People talked about whether one train can take 80 wagons or whether it's 4 kilometers long or 50 wagons, 50 trucks. The efficiencies are clear, if only we can make the economics work. And the African integrated rail network, I work with the African Union on this, is going to require an enormous amount of investment. And the question is, where do we get that money from? Another factor is the whole question of the environment. Again, we know the case. We know that the railways are the cleanest way of moving people and goods in volume around the continent. And yet, the volume of freight traffic, as you know, across Africa, like, by the way, in Europe, has remained very static over the last 20 years. Something has to change. This is a statistic actually from SARA as to the instance of intra-SADC rail freight over the last few years. Now, of course, we've got the COVID years in the middle of that, but it's still not very encouraging. It means that we've got to do something special to change that dynamic. And SADC said recently in one of their reports that the railways, and we heard this just now, railways are currently operating as self-contained operations and not in an integrated way. And that's something which clearly has to change if we're going to change the dynamic in Africa. So last year, Minister Creasy was with us. She said something quite interesting. She said, firstly, that there's not enough funding. Well, I think we probably all agree that. And secondly, that there is a need for greater regional integration amongst the railway operators, interoperability. We've heard this time and again yesterday and today. So how do we deal with that? The problems of integrating the railways, they're manifest. You know them as well as I do, if not better. I would just like to highlight that there's a lack of finance. And we've heard a lot about the lack of finance over the last day or so. The minister yesterday, Minister Creasy, actually quoted this statistic from the UN ECA about the need for 132,000 wagons between now and 2030. When I first had that figure presented to me by the UN, I said two comments to them immediately. Firstly, well, three comments actually. Firstly, good luck with finding 130,000 wagons between now and 2030. You won't find them. Secondly, how the heck are you going to finance them? And thirdly, what about the locomotives? Nobody's been talking about the locomotives. If you think that the wagons are going to be needed, you've got to provide the locomotives to move the wagons around. So probably, even by their own calculations, you've got a $50 billion gap in terms of financing. And of course, it's not going to be bridged. The private sector is the solution. It can help. But at the moment, a lot of funding is coming in through foreign aid, through state funding. These all have conditions attached to them, and the money's not always available. The private sector has the money, and you're seeing in other parts of the world, in Europe, for example, an increased involvement of the private sector financing rolling stock. But if you don't have sound state guarantees, the private sector is naturally, it's a business, they're naturally very reluctant to finance rolling stock without another source of credit. And the question is why? Here are some of the problems bringing in private capital that we see all the time. But I won't go through the list. But one of the biggest problems is country credit risk. And I can illustrate that very, very clearly through the analysis that the OECD makes of states in Africa. And they classify risks from 0, which is Qatar and Switzerland, through to 7, which is unfortunately Mozambique and Ethiopia and so on. And the difficulty is, as you can see there, that over 60% of African states are in the worst possible risk category. And then another quarter are in the second worst risk category. Now, you may say, well, that all sounds very theoretical. What does that actually mean in terms of amounts? Well, the OECD, when they're gauging their export credits, they actually create an indicative range for risk premiums that will be charged by export credit agencies. And you can see there's a dramatic difference between Category 3, which, for example, includes Botswana, and Category 7, which, for example, includes Zimbabwe and Mozambique. And that adds massively to the cost of financing any transaction. So this is a premium that they will charge in addition to the financing costs. So basically providing a guarantee. It's a guarantee fee. Visually, you can see it like this. But even though it's a range, the reality is that these days, export credit agencies are really moving to the top of the range rather than the lower part of the range. In the SADC area, look, I mean, the figures speak for themselves. You can see how many countries are in this worst possible category. The only countries that are not in the worst or the second worst category are, as you can see, Botswana, Mauritius, and South Africa. So this is problematic. The answer is to move away from debtor-based financing to asset-based financing, to financing based on the collateral of the asset. And that's why the Luxembourg Rail Protocol is the answer, because for the first time it produces a legal mechanism for creditors to finance rolling stock without looking at the credit of the state or looking at the credit of the state-owned operator. Now, I won't go through the whole details of the protocol. We haven't got time. But what I will tell you is that the protocol introduces 3 very important innovations. Firstly, apart from setting a set of rules for creditors, firstly, it creates an international registry for creditors to register their international interests. And it's a public registry. Everybody can see it. And that has a huge benefit to creditors, to lessors, to secured lenders. It introduces for the first time the idea of a unique global identification system for rolling stock. Up until now, this has not existed for rolling stock. It exists for your phone, for your computer, for aircraft, for ships, for containers, for your car. There's a VIN number on the inside of the car. It doesn't exist for rolling stock until now. So this is a significant step forward, which allows creditors to take more comfort in the asset as collateral for the loan, rather than just looking at the creditworthiness of the debtor. And then the UN model rules, which were introduced about 2 years ago, set up a new system for marking rolling stock permanently with this Orvis number. And in fact, we're working with the UN at the moment to look at ways of migrating that system onto digital platforms, which brings some amazing advantages. So the protocol applies to all rolling stock. Doesn't matter, locomotives, wagons, passenger freight. It can be new, it can be used. It doesn't matter where it's manufactured. So it's a very broad definition that's covered by this treaty. It's been in force since the 8th of March 2024, International Women's Day, and it's very important. And it's currently in force in 6 states. The latest country to ratify is South Africa. But there are many other countries that have either signed the protocol or working towards the adoption of the protocol. We have clear public policy at the AU level to move forward with the adoption of the protocol. But it's happening too slowly at the moment. In Africa, as you can see, two countries have ratified. One has signed but has not yet ratified. It's a shame. This is an important tool, and we have to move forward quickly to use it. This was South Africa ratifying the protocol back in January. It's now officially in force, but it still needs to come into domestic legislation. But we're working very closely with the South African government to bring forward that legislation, which should come forward in the next few months. And that means that we can then see transactions being done with the benefit of the protocol in South Africa. And I hope that that will move across to other jurisdictions. Now, there are all sorts of benefits from doing this. And again, I'm not going to read the slide. You'll get the slide afterwards. But I do want to highlight one particular point and announce something to you as well. Firstly, we're working very hard with the export credit agencies across the OECD to get them to introduce what we call a Cape Town discount, that they reduce their risk premiums when the Luxembourg Protocol applies. Now, that's not a radical suggestion. They do it already on aircraft. And we're saying to them, guys, come on, you're telling everybody you're supporting sustainable finance, sustainable projects, environmentally sustainable projects, and yet at the same time you're financing aircraft or supporting aircraft finance with a discount on your premiums where the same conditions applying to rolling stock, you're not giving that discount yet. You can't do that. That's hypocritical. And I'm hoping that's going to change quite quickly. But it is changing, and it's changing here. And what I can tell you today, and some of you may know this, but possibly some of you don't know this, the ECIC, the Export Credit Agency for South Africa, has announced this morning that they will reduce their risk premiums by up to 20% if the Luxembourg Rail Protocol applies. And that's significant. It's going to be a significant benefit for the manufacturing community here in South Africa, and also a significant benefit for countries outside of South Africa who can take the benefit of more favorable financing, which will begin to square that circle between financing with private capital at a sustainable rate and actually making the projects that they're supposed to be servicing work. SARA did a study for us some years ago looking at the positive impact of the Luxembourg Protocol across Africa. If you look at it for South Africa, they quantified the benefits as about 1.3 billion euros. If you look at it across the SADC states, you can see it varies significantly based on the credit rating of the individual country. But you can see that there are some significant benefits there. And every number on that screen tells you it's effectively a discount from the cost of the asset for the operator. So the benefits of Southern Africa, it's a common framework. If you adopt an international treaty, the same system is applying across various countries. It was reducing the risk and costs for the creditors, which means that you are able to negotiate better rates with the funders. And it also, through the Orvis numbering system, supports a lot of interoperability within the African system, as well as delivering quite a few other advantages. It's obviously going to make it easier for operators to procure rolling stock, and we know we need it. It delivers cheaper finance through lowering the risks for the creditors, but also bringing in more investors because they understand what they're doing. They understand the legal system that's protecting them. If you've got a common system, a common legal system, you can have common documentation. You can move rolling stock much more easily between jurisdictions because the same conditions apply in terms of the creditor. So all of this will make life a lot easier. And as I said before, it should also reduce the cost of credit when there's export credit guarantees coming in. So it's a key to the development of the SADC rail networks. Together we're better, as the slogan goes. Regional procurement ideas should be on the table, where railways come together and they actually negotiate block deals with manufacturers so that they can negotiate down the value, have standardized equipment, and move that equipment around the system. Look at collective financing systems. If you've got the same conditions applying, then you can finance rolling stock in different countries under the same terms. Or perhaps, and this is another idea which is not new, you have an asset pooling system where you set up a company owned by various railways, and then that purchases all of the rolling stock and then leases it out to the individual operators as they need them from time to time. All of those structures are possible with the protocol. And it leads to equipment standardization. If we had more time, I would explain to you why. But it also gives much more flexibility for operators. It definitely will create an economic catalyst for higher residual values because lessors will want to see standardized equipment being leased, and that will reduce the rentals at the same time and increase the manufacturer's economies of scale because you have more standardized equipment. And then you can think about having model lease agreements, model finance agreements, which can operate in various different countries. So it removes a significant financial burden from government, which they desperately need. They need that money to put into infrastructure. There's no cost for government to adopt this international treaty. And as you can see, it opens up various different options for the rail industry across Southern Africa. This is what SARA wants to achieve in terms of rail freight across Southern Africa, across the SADC countries. We hope this can be achieved. It's a challenge. The Luxembourg Protocol is going to make it easier and cheaper for the private sector to bring in the finance for the rolling stock. And that, at the end of the day, delivers 4 really big positives. It means that you can support the development of financing of the rolling stock that you need to operate the rail system across Southern Africa. It's a fundamental component of open access. It's the other side of the coin. If you have people coming in as private companies, they've got to find the rolling stock. They need the finance for the rolling stock. They can't rely on state funding. And that's in turn going to generate a much more dynamic and competitive industry, which I think will be for the benefit of everyone. But having a treaty which is adopted across the region means that you have an integrated legal network, an integrated legal system, and you can have an integrated rail system. It's much easier to move rolling stock around when you're not worried as a creditor that somebody may grab your asset because you're in a different jurisdiction and the different rules apply. And of course, it supports our role as the rail industry to improve the environment conditions for our children, for the people working in the towns and outside. And last but not least, it underwrites regional trade and development and economic integration. So the Luxembourg Protocol has an enormous role to play going forward. Together we are better. It's not just good enough for South Africa to adopt the treaty. We need all SADC states to adopt the treaty. I know with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, you can't do it. You're not members of government, but governments need to be told by you as an industry that this is an easy win. It doesn't cost them any money. It's going to make things work so much better. And if they are really serious about creating integrated rail transportation and all the environmental and economic and other benefits it brings to the community, then this is a very easy way for them to support that objective. Thank you.